So this first point is all about history, and it's hard for Americans to even see it unless they've traveled outside the country and they are well read on the histories of India, on Europe, on China. Because anyone that's familiar with those countries know that they have a long storied history that goes back thousands of years. The US, on the other hand, we get excited when we see a building that's been around for 100 years. Seriously, we preserve them as historical. Guys over in Europe are like, my apartment complex, this thing is 500 years old. But seriously, the United States is an experiment. It's a country that was founded on the ideal that all men are created equal. Now, of course, it has been imperfectly implemented over the years and they keep trying to improve it. So how does this relate to fashion and style? Because American men grow up in what they believe to be a classless society. Compare that to India, where I know the caste system has been abolished, but still you have people that look down on others, and there are people that remember it. And if you go to some rural areas, you will still see a little bit of it. Let's go to the UK. Yes, I know the aristocracy doesn't have the power it used to, but still it exists. Kids don't grow up thinking that they could become the king. No, you have to be born the king. Over in France, they cut off a lot of heads in that revolution to try to equalize things, but there are still classes. In China, there's a huge divide between those that live in urban centers and those that live in the country. In fact, it's very difficult for those that come from a rural background to actually get and break into the class system that they have in some of the cities. Now, as anyone that has studied class structure, as anyone that understands history knows, how do human beings tell if somebody is of one class or another? Based on their clothing, based on their presentation, based on their mannerisms. These things are a quick shortcut that a merchant can tell, hey, I need to give that person my full attention. I better not cross them because they come from a higher level than me and they could do damage, not only to me and my reputation, but they could put my shop, in the gutter. In the United States, that type of class system has never existed. In fact, the founders of this country absolutely hated the class systems they came from. So countries that have a history of the division of the classes between people, clothing was much more important to be able to tell who is someone of importance, or you could fake it. You could look like someone of importance and be treated better. So let's talk about status. And I have to say that this word, for a lot of people, it leaves a bad taste in their mouth. They don't like the idea that you would wear a fancy watch or you would dress in a way to be able to send a signal of status. The reality is we're human beings and we use status as a shortcut to quickly tell whether or not we will trust somebody. Don't believe me? Walk into a bank. What do you see? It's built in a sturdy building. It gives you the idea, the status that they are there to stay. You walk into a lawyer's office. What does he have on the walls in his office? The certificates of the school he went to, especially if he went to an Ivy League school or a fancy school, a great state school, went University of Texas, he went to Harvard. Wherever he went, it's going to be right there so that you can see it, so that you will trust his judgment. And so he can justify charging you $1,000 an hour. So what does all this have to do with clothing? Because in many parts of the world, your clothing is your status symbol. It's the first thing people see before you even open your mouth, and they make a decision about you whether or not you can be trusted. Case in point, the doctor's white coat. Now, historically, this makes sense because there weren't a lot of places that people could actually put their money. They would put it into their homes. They would put it into their clothing. They would put it into the jewelry that they would wear. But that was, you wanted it close to you. Otherwise, it could be stolen. Well, fortunately for the United States, and by the way, the rest of the world is catching up on this, we have had many ways, especially since World War II, to actually put our economic wealth and strength outside of jewelry, outside of physical investments like properties, which are hard, aren't as liquid. To be specific, I'm talking about investments, specifically the stock market. Now, for anyone that lives in a country that's gone through hyperinflation, you know what I'm talking about. I actually have family members over in Ukraine that keep money in their $100 bills that are physically underneath the bed. Okay, not under the bed, but they do hide them in places. The reality is many people living in countries without investment opportunities have to take that money and hope it either doesn't lose value or invest in something that is going to do a better job of retaining the value. So areas like personal presentation, clothing, jewelry are often maxed out because they're lower ticket. And because of better investment opportunities than clothing, than jewelry, well, they just spend less on it than their counterparts in economies that are less stable. In summary, men don't have to express status with clothing because any excess funds, no matter how small, can actually be invested into a better economic opportunity. Now, at this point, you may be wondering, how does my style measure up? What actions do I need to take? If you're a man that wants to take action, you're tired of watching all of these videos and not actually following through, going through and buying the clothing, revamping your wardrobe, improving your image, then you need to check out our course, The Style System. Over the last decade, this has been the internet's go-to professional men's style course in which we teach you exactly what you need to know. The goal of the Style System is to give you the information you need to take action so that you can become your best dressed self. Seriously, gents, you're going to walk into a room and unless I'm present, you're going to be the best dressed guy there. Seriously, I've met men who have gone through my course and they put me to shame at times because, yeah, I dressed down and these guys came in and they owned the room. But seriously, gents, check out the course. It's all about action. It's about you taking the steps to become the man you know yourself to be. The reality is from 1870 to 1970, the amount of men spending time outside, it completely flipped in terms of percentages. In 1870, a man would spend 10 to 14 hours outdoors. In 1970, he was spending on average less than an hour. The big shift here was from rural farm work to men moving to the cities, having factory jobs, having service jobs, and the rise of the white-collar industry. And that takes us right into the youth culture, rebellion, the changing of fashion. It's safe to say in the 1960s, we saw a cultural revolution. From the rise of Elvis Presley to the rise of the Beatles, from the mods to the hippies to the counterculture rebellion, post-war generations did not want to associate themselves with their parents. They wanted something different. One of the biggest ways to be able to separate yourself from your father was to stop looking like your father. Tons of young men started to reject the conservative dress code. They wanted to dress in a manner that they felt was more suited to them, but not even realizing it, they were falling into the 1960s and 1970s fashion trends. Now, this next point has to do with something that we just expect as people. And one of the best illustrations of this isn't actually in clothing, but actually is in automobiles. So funny enough, when cars were first manufactured, they didn't have roofs and there wasn't an issue to be able to wear your top hat right there in the car. But as cars became more popular in the 1920s, 1930s, all of a sudden we started to see roofs and manufacturers realized it didn't make a lot of sense for us to make raised roofs to accommodate those hats. Let's just lower the roofs and encourage men to take the hats off. Now, of course, a lot of guys are wearing flat caps or newsboys that can get away with wearing their hat in the car. But for most guys, especially if you're a little bit bigger, a little bit taller, you're going to have to take off that Homburg, that trilby, or that fedora when you get into your car. And as Americans and the world started to spend a lot more time in their vehicles, they realized the function of the hat, protecting them from the elements, all of a sudden became unnecessary. By the early 1950s, every respectable American family wanted to own at least one automobile. And as this became their primary mode of transportation, they spent a lot more time in it, not wearing their hat. Another interesting point about the rise of the automobile is that became a bigger class signifier than the wearing of a hat. Now, hats by and of themselves were never a true indicator of status. It also went with your clothing and the way you presented yourself. But in the last 100 years, as we have moved towards a more casual society, we've seen that people using class and status indicators through clothing has actually dropped off. Although interesting, it still has a big effect on people. Hence, I always encourage you guys to dress in a manner that you're sending the message you want to without saying a word by wearing the appropriate clothing. I remember reading about how the German and the Japanese, whenever they were trying to enter the US markets, they would come over and they would study, and they were amazed at how Americans actually drove. It's probably no surprise, and I know I'm doing a big stereotype here, that the Japanese and Germans, they're all about efficiency. They're all about things being designed in a way that's ergonomic. It gets you from point A to point B. A car should handle well. It should be dependable. It should probably get pretty good gas mileage. But comfort, come on, that's going to be pretty low on the list. At least it was for the Japanese and for the European customers. For us Americans, it turns out it was almost at the top of the list. We kind of live in our cars. We want something that reclines back. We want that comfortable seat. We also want a lot of room. We want to be able to spread out. We got those big cars. We want to use the full area. We want those, we don't want those skinny vehicles that are going to be more convenient and easily get around tight corners. I mean, here in the US, we all drive full-size trucks and we're not even hauling anything. Well, guess what? All that comfort, it applies to clothing as well. Now, the reality is formal clothing, especially 30, 40 years ago, was not very comfortable. I mean, I love cotton, I love wool, but unless something is made exactly for your body, and even then you can still get tight spots, it could be, it's not as comfortable, let's say, as a pair of sweats. Well, the clothing manufacturers recognized this, and starting in the 1970s, 1980s, all of a sudden, American clothing manufacturers started designing clothing that had a bit of stretch, that actually was more comfortable. Next thing you know, trends start picking up. We've got casual Fridays popping up everywhere in the 1980s, and out on the West Coast of the United States, they made it their mantra that they wanted to be comfortable when they're working. Stretch fabrics became a thing. Wearing jeans with jackets became a thing. All of this coming out of the United States because of our desire to be able to mix in our casual, comfortable clothing with a little bit of our dressier clothing. Now, by the year 2000, we were in full swing. We see performance clothing popping up everywhere. Initially, the styles were horrendous, and I can see why it gave us a bad reputation. But I'd have to say here, things are looking really good. There are so many companies now making stretch performance clothing that actually looks really good. I have to admit, a lot of the trousers I wear, a lot of the clothing I wear is performance clothing because it's just more comfortable and it's starting to look really good. But I can't deny that there was a good 30 to 40 year period that a lot of this clothing was getting sent out to the world, and people are seeing this on television. They're like, oh my gosh, yes, these Americans have no style. All that being said, I'm happy that we're actually taking steps in the other direction, because so much of this performance clothing, at least the stuff I'm picking up, is really, if you know how to piece things together, you can put together some awesome outfits, in, again, my opinion. All right, Jen, so if you enjoyed this video, you are going to love this one. Boom, right here. Oh yeah, go check it out. Click on that video, go explore.